the title they gave him that he never gave himself. Jesus of Nazareth never called himself God. That statement is not a theological provocation. It is a textual observation that the mainstream of New Testament scholarship has documented, debated, and in large part confirmed across 2 centuries of critical biblical research. In the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus refers to himself primarily as the Son of Man. The phrase appears over 80 times in the Gospels. It is the title Jesus uses most consistently in self-reference. It is drawn from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, where a figure like a son of man approaches the Ancient of Days and receives dominion, glory, and a kingdom. The phrase Son of Man in its Aramaic form, Bar Anasha, could mean simply a human being. It could also carry the eschatological weight of the Danielic vision. Scholars have debated its precise meaning in the mouth of Jesus for over a century. What is not debated is that it is the title Jesus chose, not God, not the second person of the Trinity, not consubstantial with the Father, Son of Man. In the Gospel of Mark, the earliest canonical gospel, Jesus responds to being called good teacher with the question, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." The text of Mark, written approximately 35 years after the crucifixion, presents a Jesus who distinguishes himself from God rather than identifying himself with God. The Gospel of John, written approximately 60 years after the crucifixion and reflecting a significantly more developed Christology than the Synoptic Gospels, contains the statements that later theology used most heavily to support the doctrine of full divine identity. I and the Father are one. Before Abraham was, I am. The Word was God. John is the latest of the 4 canonical Gospels, and the trajectory from the earliest Gospel to the latest is a trajectory of escalating divine identity claims. That trajectory did not end with John. If this kind of investigation is what you have been searching for, the archive runs considerably deeper. There is much more here for those willing to follow it. The question of who Jesus was, fully human, fully divine, somewhere between the two, or something categorically new, occupied the Christian communities of the first 3 centuries with an intensity that produced hundreds of competing answers, dozens of distinct theological schools, and a level of doctrinal fragmentation that the Roman Emperor Constantine found intolerable in 325 AD. The answer the council gave to that question is still recited in churches every Sunday, but it was not the only answer available, and it was not arrived at without a fight. What the early communities actually believed. The first Christians were Jews. They operated within a framework of strict Jewish monotheism that had no conceptual category for a human being who was simultaneously the creator of the universe. The earliest recoverable Christological formulations in the New Testament, the pre-Pauline hymns and confessional fragments that scholars identify within Paul's letters, describe Jesus in terms of exaltation rather than pre-existent divine identity. The Christ hymn in Philippians chapter 2, which most scholars date to a tradition earlier than Paul's letter itself, describes Jesus as one who emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in human likeness. It then describes his exaltation after death. God highly exalted him and gave him the name above every name. The theological movement in this hymn is from human humility to divine exaltation. It is not the affirmation of a pre-existent divine being who temporarily took human form. It is the story of a human being who was elevated by God to a position of unique cosmic authority following his death and resurrection. That understanding of Jesus, known in scholarship as adoptionist or exaltation Christology, was present in the earliest recoverable layer of Christian tradition. It was not what the Council of Nicaea affirmed in 325 AD. But this is not the strangest part of what the early record preserves. What do you think it means that the earliest recoverable Christology in the New Testament describes Jesus in terms of exaltation rather than pre-existent divinity, and that the tradition which affirmed pre-existent divinity took 3 centuries to become official? Leave that in the comments. This community was built for exactly that conversation. Ebionism was an early Jewish Christian movement, documented in the writings of the Church Fathers Irenaeus, Origen, and Epiphanius, that understood Jesus as a fully human figure chosen and empowered by God at his baptism. The Ebionites used only the Gospel of Matthew, rejected Paul entirely, and maintained the practice of Jewish law. They were declared heretical by the emerging proto-Orthodox community. Arianism, the theological position advanced by the Alexandrian priest Arius in the early 4th century, held that Jesus was the first and greatest of God's creations, divine, but subordinate to the Father, and brought into being by the Father before all time. In Arius's formulation, there was a time when the Son was not. He was the most exalted of created beings. He was not co-eternal with the Creator. Both positions, Ebionism and Arianism, had substantial communities of believers across the early Christian world. Neither survived Nicaea with institutional support. The vote that created a doctrine, the Council of Nicaea, met in 325 AD at the summons of the Emperor Constantine. Constantine had not yet been baptized. He would be baptized on his deathbed 12 years later. He was not a theologian. He was a military emperor who had unified the Roman Empire after years of civil war, and who understood the Arian controversy, the dispute over the precise divine status of Jesus, as a threat to the social cohesion of his empire. He needed it resolved. The bishops assembled at Nicaea, estimated by most historians at between 250 and 318 in attendance, debated the question and voted. The result was the affirmation of homoousios, the Greek term meaning of the same substance. Jesus was declared to be of the same substance as the Father, not similar, not subordinate, not the greatest of created beings, the same substance, co-eternal, fully divine. Arius and the bishops who supported his position refused to sign the resulting creed. They were exiled. Arius was banished from Alexandria. His books were ordered burned. Possession of them was punishable by execution. The enforcement order is documented in Eusebius of Caesarea's Life of Constantine, written by a bishop who was present at the council and held in university collections internationally. The full divinity of Jesus was not a teaching that emerged organically from the earliest Christian communities and was simply confirmed at Nicaea. It was a position that won a vote, in a room, under imperial pressure, over the objections of a significant portion of the Christian world. If this investigation is surfacing things that your standard education never reached, it means the work is doing what it was built to do. That clarity is what keeps this archive alive. Bart Ehrman of the University of North Carolina, whose academic work on the development of Christology is among the most widely read in the field and is held in university collections internationally, has documented this trajectory in detail in his published scholarship. Ehrman traces what he calls the exaltation of Jesus, the process by which the human Jewish teacher of the synoptic tradition became the pre-existent divine logos of the Gospel of John, and ultimately the homoousios of the Nicene Creed, as a historical development spanning 3 centuries rather than a theological given present from the beginning. What the text that lost the vote preserved. The Arian position did not disappear after Nicaea. Constantine himself, in the final years of his reign, moved toward a more Arian theological position. His son and successor Constantius too was an Arian. The Visigoths, the Germanic people who would eventually sack Rome in 410 AD, were converted to Christianity in its Arian form by the bishop Ulfilas in the 4th century and remained Arian Christians for generations. The theological position that Nicaea condemned as heresy was the form of Christianity practiced by the Germanic peoples who dismantled the Western Roman Empire. That historical irony has not received the attention it deserves. The texts that preserved alternative understandings of Jesus's identity beyond what Nicaea affirmed include the Nag Hammadi documents, which present a range of Christological positions reflecting the diversity of early Christian thought before institutional standardization. The Gospel of Thomas presents a Jesus who points toward interior illumination rather than theological doctrine about his own nature. The Gospel of Philip presents a Jesus whose relationship to the divine is described in terms that do not map onto either the Nicene formula or the Arian alternative. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered at Qumran between 1947 and 1956, and held at the shrine of the book in Jerusalem, do not mention Jesus, but establish the context of the Jewish messianic expectations within which the earliest Christians were operating. The messianic figures described in the scrolls are powerful and divinely commissioned human leaders, not pre-existent divine beings temporarily inhabiting human flesh. The Ebionite tradition, which understood Jesus as the greatest of human beings chosen by God, was the form of Christianity practiced by communities in the Eastern Mediterranean, communities that were geographically and culturally closest to the original context of Jesus's ministry. They were on the losing side of the vote in 325 AD, what was settled in that room, and what was not. The Council of Nicaea settled the institutional question. It established the formula that the Roman imperial church would enforce and that the councils and creeds of subsequent centuries would elaborate. The Nicene Creed, produced in 325 AD and refined at the Council of Constantinople in 381 AD, became the definitive statement of Christian orthodoxy on the question of Jesus's identity. It did not settle the historical question. The historical question, the question of what the earliest followers of Jesus actually believed about who he was, remains an active area of scholarly investigation. The answer that emerges from the careful examination of the earliest recoverable texts, the pre-Pauline fragments, the synoptic traditions, the Jewish Christian communities, is an answer that looks considerably different from the Nicene formula. The earliest recoverable answer is something closer to this. Jesus was a human being of extraordinary spiritual authority who was exalted by God to a position of unique cosmic significance following his death. His identity was understood in terms drawn from the Jewish tradition, from the Danielic Son of Man, from the Davidic Messiah, from the wisdom tradition of the Hebrew Scriptures. He was not, in the earliest recoverable tradition, identified with the creator of the universe in the terms that the Nicene Creed would establish 3 centuries later. That identification was built gradually, over 3 centuries, through a process of theological development that culminated in a vote taken in a palace meeting room in 325 AD by bishops summoned by an unbaptized emperor who needed the question resolved before it fractured his empire. The Nicene Creed is still recited every Sunday by more than 1 billion people. Most of them have never been told that it was voted into existence. If this investigation has opened something you want to carry further, share it below. If this kind of work deserves to continue, you know what to do. And the question worth debating in the comments: if the doctrine of Jesus's full divinity was a theological development that took 3 centuries to reach its official formulation, does that make it less true? Or does it simply mean that the tradition was working out its understanding of something that exceeded the categories available to it from the beginning?